boy lived in a small, dusty house on the edge of the city. The walls were thin, and the floorboards creaked whenever he walked across the room. There were no expensive toys, no video games, and no fancy gadgets. What he had was a small, old piano in the corner of the living room. The wood was scratched, some of the keys were chipped, and the sound it made was not smooth, but to him it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. Every day after school he would rush home, throw his bag on the floor, and sit in front of the piano. He would close his eyes, stretch his fingers over the keys, and let his imagination take over. The boy's mother worked long hours at a local factory. She was kind and hardworking, but often too tired to notice the hours he spent practicing. Sometimes she would peek into the living room and see him playing quietly, and a small smile would form on her face. She did not know much about music, but she could see that her son had something special. His father had left when he was very young, so music had become his escape and his companion. It was a world where he could express himself without words. The boy did not have a teacher. He had never taken a single music class. He could not read music sheets, but he had an ear for melodies. He listened to the songs on the old radio, the ones his mother liked, and tried to play them by memory. Sometimes the notes would be wrong, sometimes the rhythm would stumble, but he kept trying. Slowly, the sounds became smoother, more confident. His fingers learned the path of the keys like they had a mind of their own. Neighbors often heard the faint music coming from his house. Some called it noise, others said it was sweet. Occasionally, a neighbor would peek through the window and see the boy moving his small hands over the keys, lost in the music. No one knew how much he practiced every day, how much he dreamed about playing on a real stage, how much he wished someone would notice him. School was hard for him. He was quiet and did not speak much in class. Other children made fun of him because he wore old clothes and could not run as fast in sports. Sometimes he felt invisible, like he did not belong anywhere. But the moment he returned home and touched the piano, all those worries disappeared. He felt strong, important, and happy. Music became his shield against the harsh words of the world. Every night, before going to bed, he would sit on the old wooden stool and play softly. Sometimes it was a melody he had heard on the radio. Other times it was a song he created himself. The notes floated through the room, through the walls, into the quiet streets outside. The boy did not know it yet, but his music had a power. It could move hearts, bring tears, and inspire those who listened. His best friend was not a person but the piano itself. He talked to it as if it could understand him. He would tell it about his day, about the mean words at school, about the dreams he had for the future. And the piano responded with sounds that comforted him. The high notes were like laughter, the low notes were like hugs. He spent hours playing, practicing, and imagining. Sometimes, he imagined a large hall filled with people clapping for him, smiling faces, and a stage with bright lights. But in reality, he was alone. One rainy afternoon, he found an old music book in the corner of a small, dusty bookstore. The pages were yellow and torn, but inside were melodies he had never heard before. He carefully bought it with the few coins he had saved. That night, he tried to play the first song. His fingers fumbled at first, but he kept trying. After several attempts, the notes began to flow. It was not perfect, but it was beautiful in its own way. He felt proud. He felt hope. Even though life was hard, the boy never gave up. He knew he would face challenges, but music gave him courage. He imagined one day playing in front of people who would understand him, who would see his talent, and who would appreciate his hard work. The thought of that made him practice even more. His small hands grew stronger, his memory sharper, and his love for music deeper. Every note was a step closer to his dream. Neighbors and friends began to notice his dedication. Some would stop and listen, even if just for a few minutes. A few were amazed that such a small boy could create so much music from an old, broken piano. These small moments encouraged him to continue. He did not play for fame or money. He played because music was his life. The boy's life was simple, but it was filled with determination. Every key he pressed, every melody he created, was a testament to his resilience. Though the world outside was challenging, He had found a place where he belonged. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a friend, a teacher, and a doorway to a world full of possibilities. And even though no one else could see the full extent of his talent yet, he knew that one day, the world would hear his music, and nothing would ever be the same again. The day of the big performance arrived, and the boy could feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness in his chest. He had practiced for weeks, perfecting the piece he wanted to play, yet the thought of facing a room full of strangers made his stomach twist. The hall was enormous, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and rows of seats stretching further than his eyes could see. Children from other schools, dressed in crisp uniforms and carrying shiny instruments, were waiting, chatting, and laughing. The boy felt a little out of place, his worn clothes and small, slightly battered instrument making him feel even smaller. The director, a man known for being harsh and critical, walked through the room with a clipboard in hand. He had seen countless young musicians, and he had high expectations. When he noticed the boy, his eyes narrowed, and a faint smirk appeared on his face. He whispered something to his assistant and shook his head slightly, clearly amused. The boy overheard a remark, loud enough for others to hear. "If he plays the piano, I'll kneel right here." The words were meant to mock, but they stuck in the boy's mind, mixing with both fear and determination. The boy took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was there. He had come this far, and no one could take away the months of practice, the hours spent alone with his music, or the dreams he had carried in his heart. He focused on the piano, the keys that had been his companion through lonely days, his teacher, and his friend. The noise of the hall faded away, replaced by the soft hum of his own heartbeat and the rhythm of his imagination. As he walked toward the stage, the whispers and laughter from the other children became a dull background. He noticed some faces showing surprise that someone so small and seemingly inexperienced would dare to perform. But he ignored it. He had learned that doubters were part of every journey, and their words could not touch the music he carried inside. He sat down at the piano, adjusted the stool, and placed his fingers lightly on the keys. The polished surface felt strange under his touch, but he closed his eyes and let memory guide him. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, yet they held a fragile beauty. The boy allowed himself to imagine he was back in his small living room, playing for no one but the empty walls that had always listened. Slowly, his confidence grew, and the music became stronger. The piece he had chosen was a reflection of his life. Quiet moments of struggle, bursts of hope, and longings that no one could see in his everyday face. The audience began to notice the change in the hall. The whispers quieted, replaced by the sound of attentive listening. The director leaned closer, his smirk fading, replaced by a look of surprise. The boy's fingers moved gracefully, but not perfectly. There were small slips, but each note carried emotion. Each chord told a story. The director's eyes widened, his disbelief growing. He had mocked the boy, expecting a timid, forgettable performance. But here was something extraordinary. The hall felt alive with the music, the sound filling every corner, wrapping around the audience like a warm embrace. Other children stopped talking and watching their own instruments. They were drawn in by the honesty of the boy's playing. It was not about speed or flawless technique or flashy gestures. It was about the music itself, the heart behind each note. Some faces showed tears, others smiles, and a few mouths dropped open in astonishment. The boy felt a strange mix of nervousness and exhilaration. He had never intended to impress anyone, yet he realized that in sharing his music, he had touched the hearts of those listening. The director, who had been standing silently for a moment, took a deep breath. He moved closer to the stage, kneeling slightly in disbelief, his own arrogance replaced by genuine awe. The boy could feel the weight of the director's gaze, but chose not to let it distract him. He focused on the music, letting the melody tell everything he could not put into words. Each note was a declaration that talent could exist anywhere, that dreams could persist despite obstacles, and that determination could break through mockery and doubt. The piece continued, flowing effortlessly, yet carrying an undercurrent of emotion that no one could ignore. The hall seemed to hold its breath with every chord, every pause, every rising and falling note. The boy's small hands moved faster and more confidently, his own heartbeat matching the rhythm of the piano. He was no longer just playing notes. He was sharing himself, revealing the struggles and joys of his life through sound. It was as if the piano itself understood him, responding to every thought, every feeling, and amplifying it for the entire room to feel. When the final note rang out, there was a brief silence, a moment when the audience seemed suspended in awe. Then, slowly, applause began. At first tentative, then stronger and louder, filling the hall with the sound of admiration and amazement. The boy's chest swelled, and tears pricked his eyes. He had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, and now he stood victorious not because he had conquered others, but because he had expressed the truth of his soul through music. The director finally spoke, his voice low and respectful. "You have a gift," he said. His eyes, which had been mocking before, now shone with sincerity. The boy felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of relief, pride, and newfound confidence. He realized that the words meant more than recognition. They were proof that his dedication, his practice, and his belief in himself had been worth every moment of struggle. After the performance, many people came forward to speak with him. Some offered encouragement, others advice, and a few even asked if he wanted to perform in future concerts. The boy, still overwhelmed by the attention, smiled politely, feeling both shy and proud. He knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more challenges, more skeptics, and more moments that tested his courage. But he also knew that if he continued to trust himself and his music, he could face anything. The boy returned home that evening, exhausted but elated. The streets were quiet, and the familiar sights of his neighborhood felt comforting. He sat down at his old piano, pressing a few keys softly, as if sharing the triumph with the instrument that had always been by his side. The notes sounded sweeter now, filled with confidence and hope. He realized that while the stage had been big, the true joy of music was in the expression itself, in the ability to tell a story that could reach others' hearts. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the director's mocking words and how they had challenged him. He understood now that ridicule was often a test, a way for others to see who would rise above doubt and fear. Music had been his answer, his shield, and his voice. He knew that many more tests awaited him, but he was ready. He had discovered that courage and passion could silence even the harshest critics, and that true talent was recognized not by perfection, but by the heart behind it. In the following days, the boy continued to practice, exploring new melodies, experimenting with rhythm, and refining his technique. He listened carefully to advice from mentors but kept the essence of his unique style intact. Each note became a step forward, each melody a bridge to his dreams. The boy understood that recognition was fleeting, but the dedication to his craft would last a lifetime. He played not for fame, not for approval, but for the love of music itself, the joy it brought, and the story it told. The director, now a supporter rather than a skeptic, spoke about the boy to colleagues and friends. He praised the raw talent, the dedication, and the courage it took to perform under pressure. Invitations came for small recitals, private lessons, and opportunities to collaborate with experienced musicians. The boy's life, once quiet and limited, was opening up to possibilities he had only imagined in his dreams. But despite the new attention, he remained humble, focused on the piano, and committed to the music that had always been his true companion. Through it all, the boy learned a vital lesson: that challenges and ridicule are not barriers but opportunities to prove one's strength. That the power of music can transform doubt into admiration, fear into courage, and isolation into connection. And as he continued to play, he knew that his journey was only beginning, that the stage, the director, and the audience were all part of a larger story. A story of resilience, talent, and the transformative power of following one's heart. The boy took a deep breath as he sat at the piano. The hall was quiet, and every eye was on him. He could hear the soft shuffle of feet, the the whisper of the audience, and even the director holding his breath, waiting for a mistake. The boy closed his eyes for a moment, letting his hands rest on the keys. He thought of the hours he had spent practicing alone in his small living room, of the rainy afternoons when no one had watched him, and of the music that had always been his companion. That memory gave him courage. He pressed the first key. A soft note filled the air, almost timid, but full of emotion. He could feel the tension in the room as people leaned forward, curious, expecting him to falter. But the boy did not think about their expectations. He thought only of the music inside him, the melodies that had been forming in his mind for years. Slowly, his fingers moved with confidence, the hesitant notes becoming a flowing melody. Each chord told a story, not just of skill, but of heart, of struggle, and of dreams. The audience began to notice the transformation. At first, there were quiet whispers, a few surprised glances. Then more people turned toward the piano. The music was not just notes. It was alive. It carried the weight of his journey, the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the dreams he had carried alone. Some children in the audience stopped playing with their instruments, their eyes wide with awe. Adults leaned forward, unable to look away, feeling emotions they could not name. The director, who had been smirking earlier, now leaned on the edge of his seat. His face was a mixture of disbelief and admiration. He had mocked the boy, expecting an ordinary performance, but what he heard was extraordinary. The music was pure, raw, and full of emotion. It was not perfect in the technical sense, but it was perfect in the way it spoke to the soul. The boy's hands moved faster, more confidently, yet with control, as if the piano itself knew what to do, responding to every emotion he poured into it. The hall seemed to hold its breath with each note. The boy's melody rose and fell, soft and gentle in some parts, strong and dramatic in others. The audience could feel the story behind each chord. They could imagine the lonely hours in his room, the dreams whispered in quiet corners, and the courage it had taken to sit here now. Some people had tears in their eyes, others smiled, and a few looked astonished. They realized that talent was not just about training or resources, but about heart, determination, and love for what you do. As the music continued, the boy lost himself completely. He was no longer aware of the audience, the director, or even the grand hall. There was only him and the piano. He felt each note, each pause, each rise and fall as if they were part of him. His fingers flew across the keys with grace, sometimes gentle, sometimes forceful, but always deliberate. He played with honesty, letting every emotion flow through the music. The piano seemed to sing with him, carrying the emotions of years of practice and hope into the hearts of everyone listening. The audience was captivated. Some were holding their breath, afraid to disturb the magic. Others were quietly nodding, feeling the rhythm and the story. The boy's performance was not about showing off skill, but about sharing something deeper, something that could only come from someone who had lived every note, felt every emotion, and dared to dream despite the odds. The hall was full of people, but it felt intimate, as if each person were sitting in his living room, listening to his private music. The director could not look away. His previous mockery and doubt had vanished, replaced by respect and amazement. He realized that the boy had achieved something far beyond expectation. He had not only played music, he had told a story, conveyed emotion, and touched hearts. The director's eyes glistened with the rare spark of true admiration. The boy's small hands were creating a sound that filled the room and reached deep into every listener's soul. The boy's confidence grew with every note. He had come this far, and now he knew he belonged here, that his music could reach people, and that he had the power to inspire. He let himself feel the joy of creation, the thrill of sharing his gift. The music flowed effortlessly, sometimes delicate and whispering, sometimes bold and dramatic. Each note was a reflection of his life, a piece of his story that no one else could tell. And the audience felt it, sensing the truth and passion behind every sound. Time seemed to stretch and bend. What felt like minutes to the boy was hours to the audience. Every pause, every rising note, every fall was intentional, building a connection between the performer and the listeners. The boy had never imagined that music could have this power, to move so many people at once, to make them feel what he had always felt when playing alone in his room. He realized that the magic of music was not just in the sound, but in the connection it created. As he reached the final part of his piece, his fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion. The notes echoed through the hall, reverberating in the walls and the hearts of everyone present. The boy played with everything he had, giving his all, letting his emotions pour out. And then, with a final, gentle chord, the piece ended. The hall fell silent for a moment, as if no one could believe what they had just heard. Then, slowly, applause began, quiet at first, then louder, until it filled the entire room. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly, his hands trembling from both exhaustion and exhilaration. He had done it. He had played from his heart, shared his story, and reached the audience in a way he had never imagined. People were standing, clapping, some with tears in their eyes, some cheering quietly. The boy looked around, taking in the faces, seeing astonishment, admiration, and emotion. He felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond words. The director approached him, kneeling slightly in disbelief and respect. "You have a gift," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. The boy felt a rush of emotion, realizing that this was recognition not just for the performance, but for the journey, the dedication, and the courage it had taken to get here. He understood that he had proven something important, that talent, when combined with passion and persistence, could overcome doubt, ridicule, and fear. After the performance, many people approached the boy. Some wanted to encourage him, others wanted to offer guidance, and a few asked if he would perform again. He listened, smiling shyly, feeling proud but also humble. He knew that this was only the beginning, that there were more opportunities, more stages, and more challenges ahead. But he also knew that if he stayed true to his music and his heart, he could face anything. That evening, the boy returned home, carrying with him a new sense of confidence and hope. The streets were quiet, and the familiar sights of his neighborhood seemed warmer and brighter. He rushed to his old piano, playing a few soft notes to feel the music again, to share the joy of the day with the instrument that had always been by his side. The notes were filled with the energy of the performance, the love of music, and the excitement of the possibilities to come. As he lay in bed that night, the boy thought about the experience. He had faced fear, ridicule, and doubt, and had turned it into something beautiful. He had shared his music with the world and had been recognized not just for his skill, but for the emotion, heart, and honesty in his playing. He knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy, but he was ready. Music had given him courage, a voice, and a way to connect with people beyond words. And as he drifted to sleep, he dreamed of new melodies, new stages, and new opportunities to share his gift with the world. The applause seemed endless, filling the hall with a warmth that wrapped around the boy like a blanket. He could hardly believe it. For months, he had practiced alone, unsure if anyone would ever understand his music. Yet here, surrounded by strangers, he had made them feel what he felt every day while playing in his little living room. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly as he took a deep bow, his small hands trembling with excitement and relief. For the first time, he truly felt that his hard work and passion had been seen and appreciated. The director, who had mocked him not long ago, now approached with a mixture of awe and respect. He knelt down slightly, his eyes shining. "You have a gift," he said again, but this time with the weight of admiration behind it. The boy looked into the director's eyes, realizing that the man's earlier words of ridicule had transformed into recognition. It was proof that courage and talent, even in the face of doubt, could leave a lasting impression. The boy nodded quietly, letting his music speak where words could not. After the performance, the boy was invited to speak with several mentors and music teachers who had come to witness the auditions. They asked questions about his practice routine, how he learned to play without lessons, and what inspired him to pursue music. The boy answered shyly but honestly, sharing the truth of his journey. He had not started with formal training or guidance, only determination and a love for the piano. The mentors were amazed by his story and promised to help him grow, offering opportunities that he had only ever dreamed of. Backstage, the boy could feel the energy of the room buzzing around him. Other children who had performed approached him, some with curiosity, others with admiration. They asked how he had learned to play so beautifully, and he smiled softly, sharing tips about listening carefully, practicing every day, and letting music flow naturally. The boy realized that talent was not just about perfection or technique, but about heart, perseverance, and honesty. His journey was becoming a lesson for others, and the idea both humbled and excited him. The days following the performance were a whirlwind. Invitations arrived for small recitals, private lessons, and opportunities to meet other musicians. People were eager to support him, to give him the resources and guidance he had never had access to before. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that each new opportunity came with its own challenges. But he also knew that every challenge was a chance to grow, to learn, and to continue sharing his music with the world. At home, the boy returned to his small piano, playing softly as he reflected on the events of the past few days. The instrument that had been his companion for so long now felt even more important. It had been the bridge between his private world of music and the wider audience that had finally recognized his talent. Each note he played reminded him that his journey had only begun, that there were still stages to conquer, melodies to explore, and hearts to touch. His mother watched quietly from the doorway, pride shining in her eyes. She had seen her son struggle, practice, and dream, and now the world was beginning to see him too. She did not fully understand music, but she understood the dedication, the passion, and the courage it had taken for him to stand on that stage. She smiled and encouraged him to continue, knowing that his gift deserved to be nurtured and shared. The boy began preparing for his next performances with renewed energy. Each day, he explored new melodies, experimented with rhythm, and practiced with more focus than ever. He listened to recordings of famous musicians, learning from them while keeping his own style intact. Every note, every chord, every pause became a part of his growing expression, a reflection of both his skill and his heart. He realized that recognition was fleeting, but dedication to music and love for his craft would last a lifetime. At his first small recital after the audition, the boy felt nervous again. The audience was unfamiliar, and the stage was new, but he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned: courage, honesty, and passion. As he played, the music carried him through, transforming nervousness into excitement and fear into joy. The audience responded with warmth and appreciation, and the boy felt a growing sense of confidence. He was not performing just for applause, but to share the beauty and emotion that music allowed him to express. The director continued to support him, introducing him to other musicians and helping him find teachers who could guide him. These new mentors offered advice, encouragement, and sometimes gentle criticism, helping the boy refine his technique without diminishing the uniqueness of his style. He learned about dynamics, tempo, and the subtle power of pauses, but always kept the honesty of his playing at the center. The boy realized that growth was not about losing individuality, but about enhancing it. Friends and neighbors who had once watched him play quietly now began to attend his performances. They marveled at how a boy from a modest home could fill a room with music so full of life and emotion. Some children, inspired by his story, picked up instruments themselves, dreaming that they too could achieve something extraordinary. The boy's journey was becoming more than personal. It was a source of hope and inspiration for those around him. Despite the growing attention and opportunities, the boy remained humble. He understood that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, perseverance, and love for the craft were equally important. Each evening, he returned to his piano, playing not for recognition, but for the joy of music itself. His melodies became more intricate, more expressive, reflecting both his experiences and his imagination. Music had become a language through which he could communicate his deepest emotions, something that words alone could never convey. As the weeks passed, the boy was invited to perform at larger venues. The anticipation before each performance was intense, but he had learned to channel that energy into his playing. Each stage, each audience, each new opportunity strengthened his confidence. He no longer feared ridicule or doubt. Instead, he embraced the challenge, knowing that every note played was a chance to connect, inspire, and express. The director, once a skeptic, became a mentor and supporter, praising the boy's growth and dedication. He often reminded the boy that the journey of a musician was never ending, that each performance was a step toward mastery, and that the heart behind the music mattered more than technical perfection. The boy absorbed this advice, allowing it to shape him without diminishing the authenticity of his style. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, the boy sat quietly at his piano, reflecting on how far he had come. From a small, lonely room in his modest home to stages filled with appreciative audiences, he had grown not just as a musician, but as a person. He realized that talent could open doors, but it was courage, persistence, and the willingness to share oneself fully that truly made a difference. Music had transformed his life, giving him confidence, purpose, and a voice that could reach others in ways he had never imagined. The boy knew that the future held even greater challenges and opportunities. There would be more stages, more critics, and more moments that tested his courage. Yet he felt ready, armed with his love for music, the lessons he had learned, and the support of those who believed in him. Each day was a chance to grow, to explore, and to create, and he was determined to seize every opportunity. The boy understood that his journey was not just about fame or recognition, but about touching hearts, sharing beauty, and inspiring others to pursue their own dreams. The boy's journey had come a long way from the small, dusty room where he first sat at his piano. Now, he was no longer the timid child who had feared the eyes of strangers. He had performed on stages larger than he had ever imagined, each performance shaping him, teaching him more about music, courage, and life. But despite all the applause and recognition, he remained grounded, remembering the hours spent alone, the quiet practice, and the joy of music itself. With each new opportunity, he grew more confident, yet he never lost the humility that had been part of him from the beginning. He realized that music was not just a talent to be displayed, but a gift to share. He began to understand that his journey was not just about personal success, but about inspiring others, showing them that dedication and passion could overcome obstacles and disbelief. The boy felt a deep responsibility to honor the path he had walked, and every time he sat at a piano, he played not only for himself but for those who had supported him and for those who might one day follow in his footsteps. He continued to take lessons, learning new techniques and expanding his repertoire. He listened to recordings of great pianists and studied their style, but he always kept his own unique voice. He experimented with melodies, creating pieces that were entirely his own. His music became richer, more complex, yet still full of the emotion that had always set him apart. The boy discovered that true mastery came not from imitating others, but from deepening one's own expression and letting the heart guide every note. The director who had once mocked him remained an important figure in his life. He offered guidance, opportunities, and encouragement, but he also reminded the boy to stay true to himself. "Talent is only part of the journey," he said one day. "Your heart, your honesty, and your willingness to work hard will take you further than anything else." The boy took these words to heart, letting them guide his choices and his approach to music and life. As the boy grew, he began to perform not only in his city but in nearby towns and eventually in larger cities. Each performance brought new experiences, new audiences, and new challenges. He met other young musicians, shared stories and tips, and learned the importance of collaboration and humility. He discovered that while talent could open doors, it was character, perseverance, and dedication that kept those doors open and created new ones. The boy understood that the world was vast, full of opportunities, but also full of competition, doubt, and unpredictability. What mattered most was staying committed to his passion and trusting his own abilities. In quiet moments, he returned home to his old piano. No stage, no audience, just the familiar keys beneath his fingers. These moments reminded him of his beginnings, the hours of practice in solitude, and the love for music that had never wavered. He played softly, experimenting with new melodies, refining old ones, and letting his emotions flow freely. The music was his anchor, his way of reconnecting with himself and the journey that had brought him this far. It reminded him that while recognition and applause were rewarding, the true value of music was in its ability to express what words could not. The boy also began to mentor younger musicians. He remembered the feeling of being overlooked, of practicing in silence, and he wanted to help others discover their potential. He offered guidance, encouragement, and sometimes gentle criticism, teaching them to listen carefully, to practice with patience, and to express themselves honestly through music. Watching these young musicians grow gave him immense satisfaction. He realized that his own journey had created opportunities for others, and that passing on knowledge and inspiration was as rewarding as performing himself. Over time, the boy's reputation as a talented and passionate pianist grew. He was invited to perform in prestigious events, collaborate with well-known musicians, and participate in competitions. Yet he never allowed the pressure or attention to overshadow the joy of playing. He understood that the essence of music was emotion, connection, and expression. Each note he played carried a piece of his life, a part of his story, and a message to those who listened. The boy's performances became experiences, moments where audiences could feel the truth and sincerity in his playing. Despite his growing success, the boy never forgot the early days of struggle and solitude. He often reflected on the moments of doubt, the hours of quiet practice, and the fear of performing for the first time. He realized that those experiences had shaped him, teaching resilience, patience, and humility. They reminded him that talent alone was not enough. It had to be nurtured with effort, dedication, and an unwavering love for what one does. The boy understood that challenges were not obstacles but opportunities to grow and refine both skill and character. As he matured, the boy began composing his own music, blending the lessons he had learned with his unique style. Each composition was a story, a reflection of his journey, emotions, and dreams. He shared these works in performances, recordings, and small recitals, touching the hearts of listeners in ways that went beyond technique or fame. The music carried authenticity, honesty, and emotion, connecting deeply with people from different walks of life. The boy found joy not just in playing, but in creating, sharing, and inspiring others through his art. The boy's family continued to support him, proud of his accomplishments and the person he had become. His mother, who had watched him practice for years in a small corner of their home, now celebrated his achievements with quiet pride. She understood that the boy's success was built on hard work, perseverance, and the courage to follow his dreams. The piano that had been his companion through lonely hours remained a symbol of his journey, reminding him of the foundation on which his talent had grown. Looking back, the boy realized how far he had come. From a modest home and a broken piano to stages, audiences, and recognition, his journey was a testament to the power of persistence, passion, and belief in oneself. He understood that every moment of struggle, every hour of practice, and every challenge had led him to this point. And while he had achieved so much, he also knew that the journey was ongoing. There would always be more to learn, more music to create, and more hearts to touch. The boy had become more than a pianist. He had become a storyteller, a mentor, and an inspiration. His music carried the lessons of his life, the emotions he had felt, and the dreams he had nurtured. He had discovered that true success was not just in applause or recognition, but in the ability to inspire, connect, and make a difference. Each performance, each note, each melody was a continuation of the journey that had begun in a small, dusty room with a broken piano. As he continued to play, compose, and perform, the boy remained true to himself and to his music. He understood that the greatest gift he could offer the world was not just talent, but authenticity, passion, and dedication. His journey was a reminder that no matter the obstacles, no matter the doubts or ridicule, perseverance and love for what one does can transform dreams into reality. And through his music, The boy had found not only his voice but a way to touch the hearts of countless others, leaving a lasting legacy that would continue to inspire for years to come.